Denver Startup Week. I'm Ben Data, co-chair of DSW. This year marks the 10-year anniversary of Denver Startup Week. This community has been the catalyst for lots of change over the past decade, and this week we're coming together to celebrate the past and dream big for the future. We are able to bring Denver Startup Week to this community thanks to our 2021 sponsors. Thank you to our HQ and title sponsor, Amazon, and our title sponsors, whose leadership makes this week come to life. Capital One Cafe, Downtown Denver Partnership, Fluid Truck, Hotel Engine, and WeWork. And our track sponsors, who have made all of the great content you're hearing today possible. Founder Track, Kickstart, Growth Track, Friday Health Plans, Developer Track, Quizlet, Product Track, Palantir, Designer Track, Battery 621 in the Public Works, People Track, Exactly, and Spotlight event sponsor, Strat Labs. Our headline event sponsors are bringing the excitement this week. Thank you to B-Side Fun, Colorado Public Radio, Comcast, Coors Brewing Company, Denver Pavilions, Entrepreneurship at the University of Denver, Gusto, JP Morgan Chase, Method, Moss Adams, Pine Insurance, Promontory Mortgage Path, Red Bull Basement, Southwest, Tattered Cover, and VF Venture Foundry. Finally, thank you to our partner and member sponsors listed on the screen. Please say thank you to these companies as you enjoy our hybrid Denver Startup Week. And don't forget to use hashtag Den Startup Week to share your experience and moments of inspiration on social media. Have a great week.
Hello everyone, welcome to Denver Startup Week. I'm John, the Spotlight Track Chair and member of the Denver Startup Week Organizing Committee. Thank you for joining us for the 10th anniversary of Denver Startup Week. At Denver Startup Week, we strive to make all of our sessions a space where attendees can connect, learn, and grow regardless of age, gender identity, gender expression, race, ability, or sexual orientation. A special thank you to our sponsors for their support in helping us keep DSW free and accessible for all. Thank you for joining us and have a great week.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us for our panel discussion, Your Voice Matters, the Business Benefits of Advocacy. My name is Anna Stevens, and I am the Colorado Outreach Manager for Small Business Majority. And I'm so excited to be here today bringing you this panel. A little bit about Small Business Majority and Good Business Colorado, who both collaborated on this panel. With over 400 members across the state and spanning a wide range of industries, Good Business Colorado is a grassroots organization of value-driven business owners working to build a prosperous economy, equitable communities, and a sustainable environment. Our members believe that business success cannot be measured by profit alone, and that true success means our planet, communities, and bottom lines are all thriving. Small Business Majority is a national small business organization that empowers America's diverse entrepreneurs to build a thriving and equitable economy. We engage our network of more than 85,000 small business owners and 1,500 business and other partner organizations to advocate for public policy solutions and deliver resources to entrepreneurs that promote equitable small business growth. Our deep connections with the small business community, along with our research, enable us to educate the public about key issues impacting America's entrepreneurs with a focus on advancing the smallest businesses and those facing systemic inequities. I would love to start off with a quick introduction from all our panelists. We can start with Alejandro, and then he can pass it to someone just about your business and why you're here today. And I would love also for it to be a conversation as I ask the questions, so you can jump in if you feel like you have an answer, and if you don't, maybe you'll get inspiration from what someone else says. So with that.
Hello, everyone. My name is Alejandro Flores Munoz. I am the owner of Combi Taco, a ghost kitchen taqueria here in Denver. What's a ghost kitchen? You're probably thinking it's a place where they scare you and they sell you food, but that's not what it is. It's a new concept, a new industry where it's a delivery-only type of model where we deliver through DoorDash, Uber Eats, Grubhub. And so we basically are a restaurant without some of the added costs, like front of the house and extra space and just those things. It's a new innovative kind of industry. And so I am happy to be part of that. But mostly I have been going and navigating this entrepreneurship journey now since 2013. I am a DACA undocumented person. And so starting up for a person like me who has disadvantages based on requirements and permits and licenses that need to be acquired to fully launch a business. As I've been navigating through that process, I have noticed that there has been a lot of disparities that particularly affect our communities, undocumented and immigrant communities. And so I have made it my mission not only to be able to grow my business, to build generational wealth for myself, but I also want to find ways where we can build generational wealth for the community. And I have a very strong feeling that we can do that through policy and legislative work, as we have been doing throughout the years. I am proud to be able to not only share my story as an undocumented immigrant, but what are the things that we need and how legislation can be unapologetically tailoring programs towards that can help folks like me and people who share my same lived experiences. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's pass it to Lloyd.
Thank you. I'm Lloyd Lewis. I'm the CEO of the ARC Thrift Stores of Colorado, and we are a Good Business Colorado member. And we are a social enterprise, a business that funds charity. And our primary mission is to fund advocacy for people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And we support a lot of other charities and people in need, in addition to our primary mission of funding advocacy. And I'm just pleased to be part of the panel today. We very much support diversity, equity, and inclusion at our company. We very much appreciate people starting their own businesses and, getting an advantage in dealing with others and being included. And so it's terrific to be here with all of you today.
Thank you. I appreciate, before we go on to our next few panelists, I appreciate having you before them, because I feel like it's a great transition into having a business owner, someone who has a social enterprise, and then our two legislators who both are entrepreneurs or former business owners as well. So whichever one of you wants to jump in first,
You want me to go? I'll go. Hi, thanks for having me today. My name is Alex Valdez. I am state representative for House District 5, which is downtown Denver, Rhino, Lodo. I always say all of the does, Sobo, Loho, all of them. Anyway, this is a district that is just has a ton of startup activity, a ton of co-working spaces, lots of cool stuff going on down here in the restaurant industry, all sorts of stuff, which is why I'm so proud to represent it as an entrepreneur who myself started my business at a place called Green Spaces on 26th and Walnut. Just me sitting there in the heat, trying to figure out how to get a business going back in 2009. So while I've moved on to legislative matters as a day-to-day, I still think every day about how I can make the experience of growing the businesses of tomorrow here in Denver a reality, how to break down barriers to accessing capital, and of course, trying to find ways to make sure that all of the advances that we make are inclusive of folks who are in a bunch of different category groups that have traditionally found it harder to make their way in the startup world. So congrats to everybody for doing what you're doing. I'm really glad to be here today. Looking forward to having a great conversation. Off to you, Rep. Amabile.
Thanks, Alec. So my name is Judy Amabile, and I am the representative for House District 13, and that is the western part of the city of Boulder, the western part of Boulder County, and then Gilpin, Clear Creek, Grand, and Jackson counties. So my district goes up to Wyoming. And I had a business for 25 years manufacturing water bottles for bicycling. The product was called Polar Bottle, and it was the first insulated squeeze bottle on the market. And we grew that business. It was a bootstrap organization. We never borrowed any money. We didn't have any investors. We just made 100 water bottles, and then we sold 100 water bottles and grew the business that way. By the time we, at the peak of our business, we had about 85 full-time employees, both temporary and our own full-time permanent employees. And the thing that we figured out was that our business really depended on them, and they really depended on us. And in 2012, we had an epiphany that we were not paying enough. So at the time, we could hire people all day for $8 an hour, and that's what we were doing. And we had to hire people every day because nobody stayed, and nobody could get their car fixed. They couldn't get childcare. They just really didn't make enough money to succeed at work. So we upped our starting pay from $8 to $12 an hour. And then we gave everybody on the production warehouse staff a 50% raise who was making more than that approximately. And we just thought, well, we can do whatever we want. It's just the two of us. And we didn't have any investors. We didn't have anybody who we needed to please except for ourselves. And at the end of a year, our production manager told us our per unit labor cost had actually gone down when we had expected that it was going to go way up. And that was really eye-opening for us. We had no idea that something like that would happen. So I got busy telling people about our experience and met Deborah Brown on the minimum wage campaign in 2016. And then we started Good Business Colorado after that initiative passed. So my interest is around how do we make life better for working people, especially the people who are at the bottom of the income spectrum. And how do we do that in a way that also makes it good for the business owner? And then what are the benefits to the whole community for doing that? And I really believe that's what Good Business Colorado is all about. And so that's part of why I decided to run. And we did sell our business, so I'm not a business owner anymore.
It's still so important, I think, to hear from your position as a former business owner and to have that mix of everyone on the panel, both current entrepreneurs and former entrepreneurs, which transitions me to my next question, which is, what does advocacy mean to you today as both current business owners and former business owners, now legislators? And feel free to jump in, whoever wants to answer first. I don't want to have to call on people. I don't want to call on people like a teacher. I feel like that's the worst. When
I'll say something. If you'd like, I'll save you from having to call on people.
Thank you.
You know, advocacy is really one of the reasons why I ended up in public office, because when you get down there, one of the things you find very quickly is that a lot of large business interests are very well served from the kind of paid advocacy perspective, the lobby perspective. But I think the most impactful lobbying that's done is actual business owners, actual individuals coming up and talking to their representative about the things that they need to thrive, because we have a state that's obviously very diverse geographically, economically, so the needs are different. I think delivering that message in a way that comes from somebody who we as representatives are accountable to, but second, from somebody who isn't paid to be there, who really is just advocating for their position on making it in life and in their business is very helpful. So I always tell people the role today is to be involved, because the system right now is set up for the benefit of a lot of larger organizations, as opposed to kind of the ones that we really want to see thrive, those that are doing startups that are really embracing future industries, those who are doing things like Alejandro said, like the ghost kitchens, things like that, you know, there's no ghost kitchen association that's up there telling us as legislators what's needed. So we really rely upon individual citizens to do lobbying. Call your local elected official, call your state elected officials, make sure they understand what it is that you need from the process in order to thrive. And that's what I think the future looks like if we're going to kind of escape this system of pay for play that we currently find ourselves in.
I guess I would just add, business is not a monolith, but that's how they present themselves to these committees and to the legislature. So they say, well, this is bad for business, whatever it is, like use the example of paid family leave. And but we didn't all feel that way. That voice wasn't representing my business. We wanted paid family leave. And we went down to the Capitol 4 years in a row and said, we want paid family leave. And after one of the hearings where some people from my company and other people from Good Business testified, one of the Republican senators met us out in the hall. And he said, why do you guys want this? Like, I just can't get it. And we tried to explain that to him that, hey, if this is good for our employees, if this is a benefit that's really going to help them and allow them to have the time that they need to have a baby or to be sick or to take care of a parent, that's going to help our business. We're going to do better, and we're going to be better able to compete with bigger companies that do offer that benefit because they can. And for us, that was more of a struggle. So I just think you're right, Alex, that you have to go down there and make sure your perspective is heard, whatever it is.
Real quickly for me, as an undocumented immigrant and a DACA recipient since 2013, I've had to navigate just simply existing in this country various ways, right? We've had to figure things out on ways that we can survive in this country. And for many years, that survival has looked like entrepreneurship. Selling for my family has been selling food door to door, various ways. But what I've come to learn is that type of kind of like entrepreneurship or business is only enough to maybe just pay the bills or to survive, but never really to grow and scale. And so for me, advocacy, when that looks like, is as I'm navigating through this process, I've come to realize, like I've mentioned before, how many barriers and obstacles are there for folks who share some of my same lived experiences. However, I have the knowledge, the language, the resources, and even some of the people in this room that I can contact and for support. Not everyone has that type of level of support. And so we need to make sure that as we are finding those barriers, that we put together legislation and advocacy that eliminates those, because not only is it going to help that immigrant family or person, but it's also going to contribute to the socioeconomic and the cultural growth of our communities.
At ARC, we do both internal and external advocacy. When I joined ARC, we had 10 employees with intellectual disabilities. I advocated as CEO and had my team become part of that advocacy. We now have over 350 employees with intellectual disabilities. Know that in the world of intellectual disabilities, 80% are unemployed. 80% are unemployed. They have very little opportunity for post-secondary education. There's an extreme housing shortage. And we've created an educational program for our employees with disabilities. And we've used the resources of ARC to testify down at the legislature against sub-minimum wages for people with intellectual disabilities. We've thrown our resources behind a housing board that I chair that creates integrated affordable housing for people with disabilities and others in need of housing across Colorado. So we maintain a presence at the legislature, but we also focus a lot of resources in support of others who are in need across communities. I put in a same-sex insurance policy when I first started. We have an anti-trans discrimination policy. We have very strong anti-discrimination policies in the company. A third of my managers across our company are people of color. Half of our managers across the company are women in managerial positions, including on my senior team. So for me, advocacy is both internal and external. We try to make a difference with our resources in as many ways as we can.
I love hearing that, just the different examples that each of you have brought, especially I think like this is a great transition when we talk about like internal and external advocacy, like having businesses that live in your values and then ultimately like also bringing those values to the community around you. And so my next question, or really a prompt, is if you could talk about a specific issue that was affecting your business, it can be internal or external, and how your advocacy was able to help solve the issue. So Lloyd, I know you just touched on some of your internal advocacy. So
one that I would talk about with that question is last year with the start of COVID last March of 20, we faced the prospect of being shut down. We lost 3 million revenue in March, 7 million in April. We advocated to become an essential business, and we were declared an essential business in April of 2020. And we have, as a result of that essential business designation, now distributed over 100 tons of food to people and organizations in need, tens and tens of thousands of pounds of supplies to rescue missions, shelters, senior centers, childcare centers, millions of dollars in funding to a lot of nonprofits in Colorado and across the country through a vehicle donation program, millions of dollars of funding for advocacy for people with intellectual disabilities. And we were able to maintain well over 1,000 jobs as a result of becoming an essential business. And we continue to do 3 to 5 relief efforts every week. But that was a very daunting challenge. I mean, we collect and resell donated items. And at the beginning of COVID, surface to surface infection was not understood. As a result, we quarantined product for 72 hours and made our case to the governor's office that the services we provide are critical and even more critical with a challenge like COVID. So that was one of the biggest challenges I've faced in my career. But knock on wood, we got through that, and we're having a good year this year.
I'd like to touch on something really briefly. So in 2018, as I was going through the process of figuring out all the requirements that would be needed for me to get my business licenses in place for my food truck when I bought the food truck in 2018, as I was navigating through the process, I realized that it was not clear enough that DACA recipients, which we have a work authorization, we have a social security number, we basically have all the requirements to be able to obtain a business license. But because in the state of Colorado, in 2006, there was laws that were passed that were hindering and limiting the access for undocumented folks to be able to obtain or receive public benefits, we were excluded from being able to also apply for business licenses. And so one of the things, a fast solution for that would be that municipalities would have to make it clear when you're looking what type of identification you can use to obtain a business license. As an undocumented folk, we look for all those requirements. We go through those lists, and if what type of documentation we have, it is not listed, then we could give up. We are not going to go through that process. And so we were able in 2018, early 2019, work with the city of Denver to make a clarification in the list of requirements, what acceptance forms of identification we can use. And we were able to add the DACA work authorization card to be a proof of lawful presence in this country, which wasn't there before. Ultimately, what we wanted to do is repeal or eliminate a couple of laws that will now allow folks to be able to obtain professional and business licenses, which I am so proud to have worked with a lot of folks in this room to be able to change that. So now folks can obtain professional and business licenses regardless of their immigration status.
So in our business, there were a few different things that came up where we had the opportunity to advocate. I'm not so sure we were ever successful, unlike others, but one thing was around tariffs. So we made our product 100% in America, almost 100% in Colorado, but we were competing in a global market. And so the other manufacturers, the bigger companies, wanted tariff relief. And we didn't want that because we were already having trouble competing with them. They were so much bigger than us, and they were importing all their products from Asia. And so somebody from the US Trade Office called and interviewed me about what would the negative effect of this tariff reduction, what would that be for our business? And I was really glad to be able to have a voice in that conversation. The other thing was around the regulation of what kind of plastics are in products. So I don't know if you all remember, but in 2008, there was this BPA scare. So most water bottles had this chemical in them, bisphenol A. And the industry was really fighting hard to not have that regulated because they wanted to continue to produce these bottles with BPAs in them. And our product didn't have that in it. And there was a lot of data that said, this is bad for you. And so in 2008, Canada banned it. And all of a sudden, the wheels came off and there was not a sporting goods company in America that would take products that had BPAs in them. So anyway, those are just a couple of little examples.
So I mean, what I would add is the work that I do in solar is very highly regulated. So a lot of the work that we were doing down at the Capitol was dealing with PUC dockets, which are very boring, but very important to the business that, you know, I'm engaged in, where we were looking to ensure that the rooftop solar side of the business had a place where the utility wanted everything to be developed by them so they could own it. And so we had to come down and testify many times on, you know, the importance of ensuring that PUC regulations specifically carved out a place at the table for kind of this smaller side of the business of doing renewable energy projects for individuals. And I think that was the advocacy that we did. And as those dockets continue and as modernization projects come through for the PUC, continue to work to ensure that the little guys have a seat at the table, because like Rep. Amabile said, oftentimes the bigger businesses, the larger global enterprises are driving policy that's beneficial to them and leaving no space for kind of the little guy. So I think everything that we do, everything that we did as a business down at the Capitol was to ensure that we carved out a space. And then secondarily, we as an industry, the solar industry is also very heavily affected by tariffs. There's a lot of tariffs on renewable energy products, which is kind of counterintuitive to the desires and wills of the American people. They're still there in force, all of them. So I lobby every single day to members of the federal delegation on strategies for how to remove those tariffs that have been placed on the renewable energy industry by the oil and gas industry to prevent growth. And so that to me is really how advocacy has worked for me, where it correlates to the work that I did in the past.
I appreciate all of your answers. I think one of the biggest strings that I see between everyone's answers is that often there is a public perception that advocacy comes with like this social backlash at times, where you take like a stance on an issue and it can affect your bottom line. But every single one of you described how advocacy has ultimately positively impacted your business in some form, that it enabled you to take a stand, whether it was becoming an essential business or trying to mold policy or effectively molding policy. It wasn't a try, you did it. And so I would love to make that more explicit and just talk about if you have seen a direct financial impact from your work in advocacy for those who are here today with startups and thinking about getting involved or more involved, really.
Well, I'll jump in because there's very specific rules and ethical things that you have to consider when you're an elected official and a business owner at the same time. While we're expected to be a part-time legislature, so many of us have a job, we need to ensure that the work that we're doing is beneficial to classes of people. So the first thing I would say is you have to, as an activist, as an advocate for your business or your kind of the thing that you're doing, you have to be helping everybody that does the same thing. There's no government doesn't work when big business controls it, and government doesn't work when laws are passed that benefit specific businesses. So you really have to look at things from, am I benefiting the entire class of people that I'm trying to help. So in my case, everything I do is with the intent of building up the entire industry, ensuring that solar in general, specifically rooftop solar, continues to grow statewide. And so that is good for all businesses. And as a member of that class is good for my business, but specifically, we have to be very, very careful that we don't, specifically advocate for our businesses and create ethical violations. And then just one other thing that I would add for my friend Alejandro over there, I saw his hat. So I'm just gonna show up because we got a big game this weekend.
Yeah, at Pittsburgh. I want to come back to my notion of internal advocacy. So I've hired 350 employees with intellectual disabilities, adopted very strong anti-discrimination policies, really diversified our management and our workforce. And the financial result of all that advocacy we've done internally, we've tripled revenue. We've increased the bottom line tenfold. And we're now one of the largest social enterprises in Colorado. The work we've done at the legislature, the work we've done in the community, what we've advocated for in terms of fairness and equity more generally, I think has made a tremendous difference on our bottom line. And I would encourage any people starting up companies to do what Judy and Alejandro and Alex have done with their companies, and they'll see the same kind of financial benefit, in my opinion.
One of my other questions is like a lot of the issues you all have talked about, especially like related to COVID or things in the past, are things that have, like you've resolved through passing certain pieces of legislation. What are the issues that you think are coming to a head that will impact the business community and particularly the startup community in the near future from your positions?
So real quickly, I think that right now there are a lot of programs, support, right, that has been provided either by the federal government, local governments, state governments, and even nonprofits, right? As this money starts running out, and also the folks who receive this money, right? Like for me, this money was mostly been used to like stay afloat and continue to stay in business, specifically because the restaurant industry was hit so hard, right? However, I feel that as a small business owner, someone who's coming up in this industry, there's still a lot of things that I need to learn, invest on, be able to grow in terms of getting the right people in right positions. I am afraid that as money starts running out, folks who have been able to stay afloat were able to just do that, but not really develop structures to be able to stay in the long run. Right now, for myself and my business, what I have been doing with all the PPP loans and the government support and loans that I've been able to do is I've been able to restructure my business to be able to scale up fast. And so one quick example of that right now, I just recently got a contract with Meow Wolf to be able to sell wholesale aguas frescas to them, something that I wasn't doing before. So before I was just a restaurant, just doing, the regular restaurant stuff. But now we're looking into how can we expand our sales and our reach. And I think providing that infrastructure and support for the long run is going to be important to be looking at, and that we create programs that are sustainable and that are continuing to just support our communities, because this is not just a one-year thing or a one-off thing that we do. We need to continue to invest in the communities.
I would say one of the big things that's looming is this housing crisis that we're having. And we already are seeing businesses aren't able to find enough employees. And part of that, I think, is because people aren't wanting to come back to work to do these jobs that are low paying and don't provide a lot of job satisfaction. But also people can't afford to live in the places where the jobs are. And we had that problem, years ago in Boulder. We almost never had anybody who lived in Boulder working in Boulder. So the affordable housing, attainable housing, transit, that's all going to impact on small businesses as they're looking to hire talent. And um, so that's one big thing. And then the COVID has really shined a light on this income inequality. And that's got to get to some breaking point where we're not a functional society with so many people who have so little versus so few people who have so much. And there are some things that we could be doing and are doing with tax policy and other policies, but we really need some federal intervention to try to address that situation, because we're not going to sell any water bottles or any tacos to people who don't have any money to buy our products. So there's that, to me, is what's looming.
I'll jump in and just kind of piggyback on Rep. Amabile's comments. I believe our biggest threat right now is lack of regulation of monopolistic enterprises at the federal level. Right now, you have Amazon and Facebook. You have several companies, but a handful controlling commerce in this country. As we move to kind of doing more and more online, they're controlling clicks, they're controlling web servers. These are by a standard interpretation of trust law in this country, are illegal enterprises. And we need to ensure that if we're going to have the ability for small businesses and startup businesses to compete in this country, we have to put an immense amount of pressure on our federal delegation to properly regulate and break up these monopolistic enterprises. And that truly is the biggest threat that we all face. And the other piece of that is kind of the divisions that are being sown by the unregulated forces in how we communicate media and how we communicate information. It doesn't seem like a threat to business, but we're starting to see more and more politicization. This is a hard word for me. I never get it right, but we're starting to see that pretty much in every sector, in every place. We're becoming very tribal. We're living in a world where very few companies control the flow of all the information, and they have no standards for that information being accurate. So I think those are threats to our very society and our democracy, which is a threat to capitalism, the system that we're all trying to thrive in. And then we also, the federal government just needs to get their stuff together and figure out how we're going to create a space for small business to compete. Ultimately, if things continue like they are, 2 or 3 companies are going to control every bit of e-commerce in this country, and that's where we're headed.
Obviously, the biggest disruption of business, small and every size business over the past year and a half, has been the virus and the continuing low vaccination rate and the continuing need for federal and state mandates for vaccinations for all employees and all employers. And, we're sitting here waiting on OSHA to come out with its mandates. And, from my perspective, I wonder what's taking so long. Business is facing the Delta variant. There may be other variants. We have this 2-month wave phenomenon. And, the longer it takes to truly address the need for vaccinations, the more our businesses are going to be impacted and disrupted. To me, it's one of the biggest things we need to do as soon as possible.
All right, I just want to add one more thing to the doom and gloom crowd. Climate change is also going to create a crushing blow as we start to get more and more of these extreme weather events and these extreme calamities. And we're going to have massive amounts of climate refugees moving from the places that are no longer sustainable to live in. And we're not ready. We are not ready.
Very doom and gloom. I want to open it up to if anyone in the audience has questions, to drop them in the chat or the Q&A, and we can answer them. I was searching for that word desperately in that moment. And if the audience doesn't have any questions, I have more. So we can give that a minute as well. One of my other questions was just really like your tips, your tricks, anything about being a business owner, your advocacy, anything that you'd like to share that's insightful that you've learned over the years, for those who are here today, because I know many people are starting brand new businesses.
All right, I'll jump in. Again, we started our business before there even was the internet. So I get that I'm old and a dinosaur, but people would say to us right in the beginning, well, are you going to get investors? Who are you going to sell it to? How are you raising money? And I get those are all realities, and they're more realities today than they were for us. And they were also like, who do you know? Like, are you networking? Have you gone out and met 1 million people in the industry? And maybe we could have really had a huge, big business, but we were very satisfied to just do the work. So every day, we just did the work all day long. We made the bottles, we sold the bottles, we worked the phones. And we weren't looking for the big, cash out at the end. We were happy with doing what we were doing. And I think that's an okay model. Like, it doesn't have to be about making some giant windfall. It can be about creating a great life for yourself and for your family and for your employees and for your community. So I think maybe that's an old-fashioned notion, but that's my hot tip.
My tip is to focus more on truly making the world a better place versus becoming someone of great wealth. I was reading a review of a book by the former CEO of Unilever and talking about successes at his company. And that was his focus. His focus was truly on sustainability and creating a diverse workforce and creating products that would make the world a better place. And, it's a very successful company. I think this is the decade of purpose. And I think if one has a purpose in their business, Alejandro's business, Alex's business, Judy's business, that's the way to truly attain success. Create a better world for people. That's been our focus at ARC. And we have never, ever been more successful. We've funded millions of dollars for advocacy for people with disabilities. We've employed hundreds with disabilities. 3 million pounds of food collected during my tenure. Supplies to rescue missions, funding of nonprofits. We're a large funder of Colorado Public Radio. But with all of these things that we've done that are, broadening the nature of our business, which is truly a retail thrift store business, we have never been more successful as a business. And I think if startups have that in mind when they start up their businesses, they will be very successful.
I would just add, because it is true what everyone said. I think everybody hears business is something that has a social impact, and they're good businesses. I think one of the things I established early when I started my company was a constitution, which is something that is more governmental and sound, but some companies call it a mission statement. But you have to have core values that when you have to answer hard questions, when you're having hard days, when you're trying to make those hard decisions, you go back to that constitution and you stick to it. It's kind of like the core values of your company. It's what you recruit to when you try to find people to help you on your mission. It's what you, it's the thing you always come back to. We all have an individual constitution that makes us who we are. And it's something that a business needs as well. You have to check the decisions you're making through your constitution. What is your mission? Where are you going? And can you go back to that 20 years from now and still say, this is still the core mission of the enterprise that I've started? It makes it so much easier. So you don't sit there, and you will anyway. You'll stay up nights and you'll have trouble sleeping, and you'll have good days and bad days and lots of bad days. I didn't have gray hair when I started my business. But the truth is that at the end of the day, what you're trying to do is really just stick to your kind of core constitution as a business. And it makes it so much easier to answer hard questions that will come your way.
I'm getting gray hair too right here. Look, I just started my business like 3 years ago, so I'm waiting for it. But I would say, I am thinking about the immigrant community, the undocumented community, what this tip will go towards. And it's, we have to redefine what entrepreneurship looks like for us, right? We have to start comparing ourselves to the Jeff Bezos and the Mark Zuckerbergs of the world. And we need to start really elevating the elotera lady, the person who sells, like my mom, when she was selling flan door to door, right? I didn't think of her as an entrepreneur then. To be quite honest, I actually was a little bit embarrassed when I was a young boy of that work that my mom was doing. Now, as I've redefined what entrepreneurship means to me, I see that person selling door to door as a valuable person to our economy. I see them redefining success, and more importantly, getting started where you're at, right? If I wouldn't have started my side hustle, it wasn't a business, it was a side hustle in 2013, selling sunglasses. I would have not learned the things that I know now, which become second nature to me now. So like, what are the requirements to obtain a business license? How do you properly document and keep your business afloat? All those little things that I was able to practice during my side hustles. And now, 5 years, 6 years later from when I started that side hustle, I am now in a position where I'm not only surviving, but I'm working towards scaling that business. And so I think that happened because I had to redefine what success and what entrepreneurship looked like for me. And so me, saying I made an additional $5,000 in 1 year, some people might look at that as not successful, but for me, I had to redefine what success was. And the success was found in the things that I learned as I was going through the hustle.
Absolutely. I think that everyone touched on this, but just the comparison is the thief of joy for business owners, for anyone, that you look at the people around you and you see what they're doing, and it's really easy to feel discouraged. We had a question come in. Do folks from the legislature hear voices from small versus big businesses in a different way? And I think this is applicable to even those who aren't our representatives, because you all have had to advocate in some sense. So you could describe your experience as well.
Yes,
of course.
Yes, absolutely. We are. And when I say we, I say it in the terms of my caucus. I'm a Democrat. Judy and I both are in the same caucus. I think we are far more responsive to small businesses because they embody kind of the value sets that we like to see within business. I think there's a lot of backlash against some of these larger enterprises that don't really pay well, don't really take care of their people. They churn through folks, whereas I always said the difference between small business and big business is that when you make a decision as the owner of a small business, you have to look the people in the eye that are affected by that change. And that makes for better decision making. Like Rep. Amabile talked about pay increases, that you have to look people in the eye. You watch their lives develop. If you're in a corporate office on the East Coast, it's not so much a connection with your employees that's going to create the kind of community that we all want to, one where people live sustainable lives, can afford to buy homes, buy cars, and buy families. And, from the perspective of the owner of a small business, the greatest pride I have is not the big checks that come in. It really is watching folks that have been working for me for over a decade now, and we have 180 people. They're buying homes, they're having families, they're doing great things. And I think that's where I get an immense sense of pride, because in some way I felt very responsible for ensuring them that access. And so, back to the original question, yes, small business, it's easier for us to see the desired goals that we hope to see for society, I think. And so the royal we, also very much sensitive to the challenges that entrepreneurs and small business people face day in and day out. So I think it's a far more impactful discussion when I'm talking with somebody who owns a small business than when I'm talking to a representative for a global corporation.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I mean, just what we hear all the time from the big business organizations is, if you do this, what we might consider a fairly modest policy, if you do this thing, we're all going to leave Colorado. Our businesses will all go out of business. The sky will fall in and everybody will die. And that's the response to almost everything you try to do. And the people who come in from smaller businesses who are representing themselves or who are represented by groups that are more advocacy oriented, they don't do that. You know, they talk about, well, here is the specific impact this thing is going to have on me, good or bad. And you can have a more reasonable conversation and you can get to compromise more quickly if you believe that the dire outcomes are real. But if every time you try to do anything, everybody tells you, oh no, it's the end. Like I had some group of people who represent municipalities, and they have also some businesses, and they said, but mostly they represent municipalities and other local government entities. And they said, well, if this policy goes through, businesses will leave Colorado. And I was like, yeah, it would really be a shame if Denver moved to Oklahoma. You know, it's just ridiculous. So.
Here's another question. In the case of conflicting advocacy, what is the most efficient process or decision to reach a solution? So maybe internally or on an issue?
Here's what I'll say. This is why elections matter, because at the end of the day, it comes down to a decision made by an elected official to make the decision that they think their constituents would be in agreement with, because we are representatives. I mean, that's what we're called. So we have to think about things in terms of acting in those scenarios as a proxy for our community. And so when you elect somebody, when you are thinking how to fill out your ballot, I always prioritize small business owners if that's a possibility, if there's one, because I know they're going to be thinking with that mindset of all the small folks that are trying to make it within the district. And one of the things I think about when I decision make for how to go when you have advocacy from both sides is what's going to help those folks that are working at galvanized and industry and green spaces and all those folks who are trying to get their businesses going in my district. What's going to be the best outcome for people? And so I think, you know, bringing it back to how I started, elections have huge consequences, as we've seen over the last several years, but local elections have the most, local and state elections have the most impact to your ability, because that's the decision maker when those choices come. And you want to know that person. You want to know that that's the person you think is going to make the right decision for you, because they represent you. And so that's what I would say is that comes down to a judgment call. It comes down to being a good proxy for your constituents. And it comes down to your lived experiences, which are all important when you as voters are looking at who's going to be the person who gets to press that button to place that vote.
I know we're running close to time. Does anyone have any final thoughts or anything they want to share? Some closing remarks? Okay. Yes, I'm having so much trouble with my words today. I think it's because I forgot to drink coffee. So, you know, Friday.
I think I'd like to share just a couple of more words in regards to how advocacy has played into my role. So prior to being a full-time business owner, I was working for an organization called America Votes. And I was a political program director here in the state. And when I left, my biggest fear was that I was going to lose that advocacy that I have been doing for so long for voting rights and just in general, a better democracy for our folks. And so as a business owner, when I transitioned, I made sure that my advocacy continued. And so I think, as Red Valdez mentioned earlier, being involved and really staying alert of what's going on within policies and issues that are happening in your community is really important, to be able to know who you can kind of like raise these issues to who you can contact to get answers for some of these things. Because believe it or not, I feel as a micro small business, right? I barely have 3 part-time employees. However, I feel that my voice in this space is really loud, because there are many of us who are in this same position where we're trying to start a business, we're trying to become more financially independent, but we're also trying to navigate through this system. And so I want to encourage all of those who are thinking of starting or who are involved in supporting immigrant-owned, women-owned small businesses, supporting them in a way where you can just make sure that you uplift those communities. And so thank you very much, everyone, for taking part of this and for being involved in Denver Startup Week. Again, my name is Alejandro Flores Munoz, and I invite everyone to visit Combitaco, combitaco.com. We just launched a brand new catering service, so I want to encourage you to visit that and share us. We would love to have your business and serve you some delicious birria tacos. Thank you.
I guess I'll just jump in and give kind of some final parting thoughts. Being an entrepreneur is very hard, and there's a lot of hard days, and there's a lot of times when you think, boy, it would be easier to quit and, you know, go find a job. And that's just not what you were born to do if you're here today, probably. So I always say, stay the course, realize there's going to be more struggle than good times. But at the end of the day, I think if you stick to the core mission of why you do what you do now, and that's meaningful to you, that you will be successful no matter how long it takes. I mean, you can look at so many stories of companies that we idealize in the United States today and see how they started in garages and with one person trying to do something. And it might take a couple of years, it might take 10 years, it might be your whole life working it. But as long as it keeps you happy and keeps you aligned with the Constitution that you have in your value set, you'll make it. And so I like to just tell people, keep on fighting, because it's always going to be a fight. It will never be easy. So don't believe it when people tell their stories about, oh, I tried it and all of a sudden I'm a billionaire. That doesn't really happen. And go Broncos.
Well, I'll just jump in on what Alex just said. It is hard to have your own business, but for me, it was a lot harder to work for somebody else. So I encourage everybody to do it.
Well, I want to thank everyone, our panelists and everyone joining us today, our panelists for being here, taking the hour out of your all very busy schedules to come and present to those starting their own businesses. And if anyone has any unanswered questions, I'll put my email in the chat. And I would love to be a resource for anyone here today. I'm sure that all our panelists will as well, and I can help direct any questions to them in the appropriate venues. And we have a big football weekend ahead, as it's been said, you know, NFL, we've got some college football. That's my area. That's my forte, so to speak. Very nervous, close odds coming up, you know, not a business, but definitely my passion, a little afraid. And I think that's really time, unless anyone has anything else they want to add before we close out.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks.